only Trump could have done this. Nobody else. Like most of you, I too was aghast at what happened in the White House yesterday. Imagine inviting the president of a country, Ukraine, a country that's in the throes of a raging war, which has sapped the economic and military resources and energies of a country, pitted against an enemy, a ruthless enemy, that's far superior to it in every respect. But most importantly, a country that finds itself in the present predicament because it trusted the United States of America, Great Britain, and Russia way back in 1994. I'll come to that in a moment. And then, in full public view, insulting him, and then pretending as though the guest president was entirely to blame and he was guilty of misconduct in the White House. Those of us who have watched the entire ritual of disgrace have our own opinions on the matter. I respect the views of my viewers. Therefore, I will refrain from giving a full account of how I view the whole situation. The limited purpose of this video is to share some thoughts on this very significant, in fact, climactic event in modern history. Let me begin with JD Vance, the Vice President, who, in my opinion, should not have been there, but he was there and he had to make his 2 penny worth of contributions, which he did most unfortunately. JD Vance is supposed to be a product of the University of Harvard. But he seems to have mastered a particular talent, which he showcased in Munich when he went there to lecture the Europeans on freedom of speech. One of the most ironic moments in that in what happened in White House yesterday was that the hypocrisy of JD Vance was thoroughly exposed. JD Vance chided the entire European countries for lacking in their commitment to freedom of expression. That is the main point on which he rebuked the entire assembly of European leaders at Munich. But what did we see in the White House yesterday? President Zelensky was only trying to put across the anxieties that Ukraine as a country experiences in this context. A peace treaty is being rushed through, and as part of the peace treaty, a trade deal or a trade agreement is also to be rushed through. I don't see the connection between peace treaty and the rare earth minerals. I don't understand, for example, how the peace in the world can be better promoted if America is given monopoly over the various deposits of rare earth minerals everywhere in the world. This logic is beyond me. And he's not a private individual. He's representing a country, and obviously his job is to try and secure the interest of his country. What do you think is foremost on the minds of Ukrainians? Clearly, it is security. You have to be in the plight of Ukraine to understand what it means to be caught in this war, which is not of their making. Ukraine has been dragged into it. Ukraine was taken for a royal ride by America and of course Europe. How many times we have heard the former American President Joe Biden and several European leaders of great distinction saying that Ukraine is not fighting a battle for itself alone, it's also fighting a battle for Europe in order to protect the democratic traditions and the European values on behalf of the entire Europe. And all that Europe expected America and Europe to do was not to supply them soldiers, but merely arms to fight with. That's very interesting that Putin can have soldiers from North Korea to fight. Ukraine can use Iranian drones and maybe even Chinese weapons, we do not know, and any amount of North Korean weapons to attack Ukraine. Putin can attack any part of Ukraine, but if Ukraine attacks any part of Russia, it's an unforgivable crime. And the entire world has followed this interesting logic. America dragged its feet, its very large-sized feet, for several months before it gave permission to Ukraine to use the ATACMS, the long-range missile supplied, because America was scared that that could provoke Putin. And I'm embarrassed to realize how cowardly America has become. If Putin rolls his eyes, America will tremble. It has come to that pass. That's the impression one can gather from what has happened so far. So obviously, it makes good sense for Ukrainians to demand security guarantees even as the country signs a treaty or a trade agreement or an agreement with the United States, which gives to the United States 50% share of all the rare earth minerals that would be mined in that country for the decades to come. You would have heard President Trump say that no one knows exactly what is the actual tune of this treaty, whether it is 500 billion or 1 trillion or several trillions. Nobody knows. But Ukraine has to sign that treaty because it is completely helpless. So surely it's part of the greatness of America under Trump that you lead a country into a trap, a death trap. And then, in the interest of establishing peace right away, force that country to sign away much of its natural wealth. And why is it that nobody can say for certain what is the extent of help, loan or otherwise, that America has extended? I have seen varying amounts. According to one estimate, it is 120 odd billion dollars. According to another account, it is $170 billion. According to Donald Trump, it is $350 billion. If America has given that help, how come that there is no clear account? Why is it that this amount has to be in the realm of speculation? And okay, let's assume that America has given arms and economic aid to the tune of $350 billion. Even then, what is the justification for insisting that Ukraine should execute an understanding with America, giving it a 50% share of all the natural, the mineral wealth of Ukraine, without any ceiling attached to it? I can understand a treaty which says that America can have 50% of whatever is mined out in the form of rare earth minerals, with the ceiling of $350 billion. That makes sense to me. But this open-ended agreement wherein America is given an entitlement which is open-ended and no end is envisaged. This is something that I find hard to understand. And equally difficult for me to understand is that the peace in Ukraine has to be tied to a trade agreement with America. Well, there are people who believe that that's an indirect way of offering security to Ukraine because if America's business interests are involved with Ukraine's, then Putin might show some respect for the territorial integrity of Ukraine. But in that case, some secret assurance can be given to Zelensky. And to the best of our knowledge, that has not been given, and therefore, I find it very hard to buy this interpretation. It's not interpretation, this speculation, pure speculation. So now, coming to Zelensky's reluctance to sign this treaty without security guarantees. As Zelensky, the president of Ukraine himself, tried to say, in which he was shouted down, and shouted down by the very man who was rebuking all the European countries for not granting sufficient freedom of speech to their citizens. The same man here in the White House will not give freedom of speech to the president of Ukraine, who is their guest. Anyway, such hypocrisies are eminently allowable in a context of brutal asymmetry of power. Now, coming to the insecurity that Ukrainians are experiencing, it goes all the way back to 1994, when Ukraine was taken for a royal ride by America, by Great Britain, by Russia. The American president at that time was Bill Clinton. The Russian president at that time was Boris Yeltsin. And the Prime Minister of Great Britain at that time was John Major. And Ukraine was made to disarm. At that time, Ukraine had the third largest collection of nuclear weapons, numbering about 1,900 nuclear warheads. If Ukraine had retained even 1% of it, Russia would not have dared to attack Ukraine. The present miserable plight of Ukraine is entirely the creation of these three nations. I named them: America, Great Britain, Russia. So Putin has absolutely no qualms in violating the understanding on which, that's called the Budapest Memorandum, the understanding on which Ukraine was persuaded to hand over all of its nuclear arsenal to Russia to be destroyed. Whether it was destroyed or not, we do not know. I'm not particularly sure about it, therefore I have no comment to make on it. The irony here is Ukraine is the foremost victim of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. The world as a whole owes an apology to Ukraine. It was for the sake of the world, in order to make the world safe from nuclear holocaust, that Ukraine took that extreme step of disarming itself and rendering itself absolutely vulnerable, trusting the words of the American president, the British Prime Minister, and the President of Russia at that time. And today, the same country, Ukraine, is virtually disowned. Look at the price that Ukraine has had to pay. Many of its cities are destroyed. 20% of its territory is gobbled up. Its economy is in shambles. At least 500,000 Ukrainians have died in battle. Civilian life is devastated. And Ukraine's indebtedness to other countries is astronomical. We do not know how long it will take the country to recover from this unthinkable devastation it has suffered. So, in a sense, Ukraine is paying the price for trusting countries like the United States, Great Britain, and Russia. It is the very same country, Russia, that America wants Zelensky to trust with his eyes closed, without any guarantees. So it was when Zelensky was trying to explain to the president of the US president and vice president and the other officers, including the Secretary of State, Rubio, that he was shouted down. He was virtually abused. I don't think any visiting president in the entire history of mankind has been treated as shabbily as Zelensky has been. I wouldn't treat a man who comes to me as my guest to my house in this manner, even in the face of gravest provocation. And here, of course, I have to say that Zelensky has another major problem, major handicap, and that is English is not his mother tongue, nor is his command of English anything to write home about. So what happens when you try to express dissent through a medium that you're not particularly comfortable with? The offensive element in it gets aggravated. So when Zelensky says something to Donald Trump and his sidekick JD Vance, they could take offense at what he's saying, the offense which is not meant. As a teacher of English language, I can tell you that if a person who is not really in good command of the language tries to express himself culturally to somebody else who is a native speaker of that language, he is likely to give a lot of offense. I know a particular instance in which a likely marriage got aborted because of English. The girl who was not convent educated, who came from a rural background, was being proposed to a foreigner, his second marriage. And the interview went horribly out of control because the girl said something which she meant well, but because English was not her natural medium of expression, she lacked that finesse, that politeness. And therefore, unmeant insult was discovered, and the result was an absolute fiasco. And this happened right in front of me. And what happened in the White House yesterday is a magnified version of this event that was played out in front of me. So perhaps Zelensky should be wiser from this experience and use only his mother tongue and use a translator when he talks like people like Trump. And finally, let me say that I'm rather amused at America's idea of greatness at the present time. America voted for Trump's idea of greatness. Because after all, he promised to make America great again. And see, he's going after his way of making America great again after his own fashion. And this is how he makes America great again. And one aspect of that I'll mention and then I shall close. There are many aspects to this, I'll only mention one. To me, President Trump is the modern version of the ancient fable king or ancient mythological king Midas. King Midas was interested only in one gift. Whatever he touched should turn into gold. And he thought that that would make him great, that would make his country great. Exactly what Donald Trump is assuming today. So he wants to be a modern day King Midas. If Donald Trump opens his eyes or his mouth or his ears or any of his five senses, only one word will come. Dollar, 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 dollar. And related to that, of course, tariff, 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 tariff. If he sees a human being, if he sees the president of a country, it is how many dollars, how many billions. The Prime Minister of India, my Prime Minister, went to have a darshan with the president. He talked dollar to him. And he ordered my Prime Minister to ensure that the volume of trade between India and America rose from its present level of $190 billion to $500 billion in a short span of time. So if he interacts with anyone, it is dollar, dollar, dollar. Tariff, tariff, tariff. So as far as Trump is concerned, greatness means money. Mammon, mammon. A human being is nothing but money, money, money. And Americans have absolutely no problem in believing that this is the essence of greatness. I can't think of a greater proof for the utter degeneration of America than this. Trump is what America deserves because it's become a soulless society that has sold itself to mammon. President is described as a transactional president. Why don't you use the correct word? He's a greedy president. He's a covetous president. He's a president with a shopkeeping mentality. That's what it is. You can only trade and traffic with him. You cannot have a human understanding with him. Don't expect a human heart from Trump or JD Vance. What does it matter to him that thousands and thousands of Ukrainians are perishing, and perishing largely because of his predecessor, Bill Clinton? A country must have a continuing history. If your predecessor has made a commitment, you cannot arbitrarily and unilaterally write it off without gathering for your country the sobriquet, if you like, the bad name of being a betrayer. So this is great betrayal. Because America is great, even the betrayal that it practices must be called great betrayal. Now this is a shame, it's an absolute shame. So when money rules human consciousness, human imagination, human desires, and shapes interpersonal relations, international relations, don't expect any morals, any values, any ideals. It's a crass market mentality. So according to the American president today, therefore, peace is money. Even peace is money. He will negotiate peace between Ukraine and Russia, provided he can make billions out of it. The rare earth minerals. Now, I don't know what idea of peace this is. It is for this reason that Trump is not sending any guarantees to Ukraine. He will take whatever he can get out of Ukraine and dump Ukraine at the earliest. After all, he is personally rather convinced that Putin has a historical claim on Ukraine, and the best scenario, the best possibility for Ukraine is to be a satellite state, if not get Russian, Putin's empire. Trump really does not believe, as per the evidence available to us so far, Trump really does not believe that Ukraine is viable as a sovereign independent state. Otherwise, he has said that the aggressor should be allowed to retain 20% of a country's territory, and also said that he trade deals with Ukraine but no security guarantees, because as and when Putin regroups his forces, gathers his might and muscle all over again, he would be in a position to launch the next attack, and the next attack would be the last attack. And when that attack ends, the boundary of Russia would be the Polish border. And it is nowhere near the conscience of Putin and Trump and his America that this is going to be the scenario. Everybody in Europe is pretty clear about it. But Trump alone says you have to trust Putin with your eyes closed. And the main reason for this is what himself states. There is a beautiful ocean between Russia and America. America is safe. It doesn't matter whether Ukraine is not safe, Europe is not safe. America is safe, and also America will have plenty of money and America will be great. Now, God save us from this idea of greatness. And what happened, what was played out in the White House yesterday? Nothing but the acting out of the practical implications of the moral, philosophical, spiritual poverty of this idea of greatness. A heartless, cruel, commercial idea of greatness which equates the worth of a man with his bank balance. Nothing worse can be said about a people. I tell you, if there was a modicum of respect that I had for America as a country, the whole thing evaporated so completely that I find it really difficult to think of America in the way till yesterday. It's very unfortunate, and the world will have to face and live out the consequences of this climactic event. This is a turning point in world history. It's not a small event. It's going to be played out, and other countries in the world would do well if they would heed and prepare themselves for the days ahead. Thank you. All the very best.